Welcome to Classic Climbing Book Review. This is A Climber's Guide to Joshua Tree National Monument. When I first saw this, I didn't really know what to expect. I thought maybe it would be a little dry, just an informational kind of basic thing. But when I opened it up, I was blown away. This book has so much funny shit in it. It's 50 years old, and there are so many similarities between climbing back then and climbing now. It blows my mind. This says A Climber's Guide to Joshua Tree National Monument by John Wolfe. That's right, National Monument. Back in 1936, Joshua Tree became a national monument, and it was a national monument all the way up until 1994 when it was accorded national park status. So before it became a national park, lots of climbers just referred to it as the monument. In fact, a lot of those old guys still do. To understand this era and this guidebook, you have to understand who John Wolfe is and who his group is, the Desert Rats Uninhibited. The Desert Rats Uninhibited was a group of climbers that formed back in 1962. What it says on their badge here, it says, dedicated to the principles of absolute and total unusualism. These were some of the guys that in the early 70s were putting up a lot of the very first routes. And a lot of those routes, are still the main ones that get done today. We can see here on the cover, I kind of skipped past it, but what do you recognize that? That is the southwest corner of the headstone. There's a bolt. A lot of leaders, new leaders know all about that bolt. It's kind of sketchy. So here they are doing it. Hiking boots, Swami belt. So here we go. This was given to Todd Gordon by Ian Carter. This book cost $3.50 when it came out, if you can imagine that. This opens up with a very nice poem by Dick Webster. This poem's called The Plan, and I'll just read the last little line here. Beauty so intense the viewer thrills in his small part. He knows that all is well. The plan is good. I love that. So here we go. Page 4, we have our first mystery. Rappel from, what does it say? Balance Rock and Ryan Campground. We all know this is Headstone, don't we? So this is the first mystery that gets opened up here. Nowhere in this book does it say anything about Headstone Rock. The question becomes, when did this get renamed the Headstone? I looked through my old books like this Randy Vogel guide and some other ones, and no one really gave insight into when it changed names. But actually, good old Mountain Project. I jumped over to Mountain Project and got an answer. Randy Vogel, Randy Vogel, again, if you don't know, he has done some of the most comprehensive, oh God, sorry, my guidebook like said shit, but some of the most comprehensive Joshua Tree guidebooks and other guides. Very, very knowledgeable dude. And in the comments of Mountain Project, he says the original name given the formation by Mark Powell and Bill Dolt Fuhrer, I think that's Dolt Tower in Yosemite. Anyway, 1958 was the can opener, right? Looks just like a can opener, right? Yeah, I don't know. And then says later, early Wolfe guides called it Balance Rock. That's what we got right here. And then he says Wolfe changed the name again to Headstone Rock, since there's some evidence that this name was used before climbers named it. A couple of the miners are buried nearby, it says. Some buried miners, a headstone. So yeah, John Wolfe ended up renaming the headstone. I don't have that edition, but in here, Balance Rock. And there's some interesting stuff in this climber's guide. This is kind of the introduction. And he goes on to say that, hey, Joshua Tree's not just a training area. It's its own area. It says, this area should not be misconstrued as merely substitute practice. It stands on its own merit of providing short, challenging free and aid routes. Even back then, Joshua Tree kind of had that chip on its shoulder, right? That short man syndrome. I could just hear Joshua Tree saying, y'all might be short and ugly and rough, but I'll kick your ass. This is a destination. This ain't a place to come practice. You practice to come here. The potential is such that significant ascents will be made here and elsewhere within the monument for many, many years to come. Well, we know what happened there, right? I mean, this book, I think, only has about less than 100 routes. And now, Joshua Tree's got, around 8,000, maybe more, and 2,000-3,000 boulder problems. So this is where it all started, with just a handful of climbers out there doing the trade routes. Look at this picture. You think you're cool rolling around Joshua Tree in your Superman onesie? Well, check this out. These dudes, and maybe girl, I don't know, I think these are dudes, were doing it way back then. Guys barefoot, they're wearing some Swiss mountaineering hats. This guy's hat says love on it. They're holding hands. I mean, come on, that's cool. They've got the rating system comparison chart over here. Some things we recognize, the decimal system, 5.2, 5.3, all the way up to 5.10, even though I don't believe there's a 5 and F10 in here. Then we have the NCCS. Now, a lot of people might not know what that is, but the NCCS is an old rating system, the National Climbing Classification System, that was proposed to replace the Yosemite Decimal System, but never really caught on. This book uses it, not many do, and it kind of got phased out after this. So for the purposes of this book, you can see that like F7 is 5.7, F8's 5.8, F5 runs a range. So this is the F system. This is old. This is history. And then we got the British next to it. Hard, very difficult. Mild, severe, severe. I mean, I thought these guys invented the English language. Exceptionally severe. Just very severe. Like, where is that? I mean, come on, guys. That's the worst accent I've ever done, but the Brits. Now look at this picture. Look at this lady. I think this might be John Wolfe's wife, Mona Wolfe, but I don't know. Maybe someone can let us know in the comments if they know. But look at how cool that is. Sitting there in front of the Hidden Valley Campground. 50 years ago, guys, remember. This is 50 years old. These guys were out here playing in the sand, playing on the rocks, just like people are now. Here we see our first desert rat cartoon. Look how cute that guy is. Here's the big map. As I said, most of this book is about Hidden Valley Campground area. So you can see they kind of did this panorama with some stitched together photos. This is the blob, Cyclops, and here's a map. Now what's cool about this map is, you might not know, but see this, how the road comes? It actually goes to the north of Intersection Rock. Used to go to the north. The road now, as we all know, curves around to the south of Intersection Rock, right? It comes around here. This is just the parking lot. This is another thing that's funny about this book is climbers have had a long history of grappling with tourists, and this is no different. In fact, and you know that thing in Joshua Tree where like tourists love to just stop in the middle of the road, and they think if they put their hazards on, they're allowed to just stop there and take a picture for the gram or get a sunset or hug a Joshua Tree. I don't know. Well, I think that was a problem back then, because here in the introduction it says on page 8, the National Park Service has been very cooperative with climbers. They ask that climbers not use the east face of Intersection Rock until such time as the main road is rerouted farther west because of the traffic hazards presented by gawking tourists. So the tourists would just stop, gawk at the climbers on Intersection Rock, back the whole thing up. Pretty funny. So they weren't allowed to climb on that side of the rock while the road got moved, apparently. There's a picture on Overhang Bypass. F7, pretty sure that's still a 5.7, so that grade held. They don't say whose name, but check that out. Imagine being the first guy to do Overhang Bypass. Well, we're gonna find out who that was right now. John Wolfe and Howard Weimer, 1969. So these guys, John Wolfe, and I'd never even heard of John Wolfe, to be honest with you. But man, him and his buddies did most of the trade routes that get done on the weekends. I mean, look at this. North Overhang, Overhang Bypass, Underpass, The Flake, Chimney, Back Crack, Mike's Books, Double Cross, Dogleg. A lot of them were free, some weren't. Some came back for them, some were aid, but man, they established these routes. It's pretty interesting. North Overhang, so that's the popular 5.9. John Wolfe and Howard Weimer, first ascent, but I don't think, first ascent at A2, so that means they used aid around that corner. I'm pretty sure it was John Long came back and got the first free ascent of that, so that's kind of when the Stone Masters took over. And that's actually a really interesting thing about this book that I didn't know. I'd always kind of known that Royal Robbins, Avant Chenard, they had their era, and they might have climbed at Joshua Tree. They definitely climbed it. Tahquitz, Suicide, that was kind of 50s and 60s. And then usually the modern story goes, then it's kind of like the Stone Masters came in. But this John Wolfe and the Desert Rats Uninhibited, they kind of had this little middle gap here in Joshua Tree. And they kind of set a standard. In fact, John Long over in a Super Topo thread I saw actually says about Dick Webster, who's the gentleman that did this poem. He said that all the Stone Masters followed in Dick Webster's footprints, and they're glad and thankful that they were laid down. So these guys, John Wolfe, the Desert Rats, kind of had that little time before the Stone Masters came in, and this book tops out at about 5.9, and the Stone Masters, boom, they ratcheted it up to, 5.11, 5.11 plus, 5.12 territory just in a matter of years, kind of after taking the torch from these guys. Like this on Howard's Horror, you get this little insight, says, the first ascent was made using aid, A3, during a torrential downpour. Pretty badass. That was John Wolfe and Howard Weimer did that aid first ascent. So, and then look, John Wolfe came back another year later and got the first free ascent. So pretty cool to go do the first aid and then come back and get the first free ascent. Kind of right there at that balance of old school climbing and new school, kind of bridging that gap that as I said, the Stone Masters would take over. So look at the I, very popular route. Call it the I, F4, yep. Another picture with the desert rat there, pounding a piton. Well, this is a great picture. So here we are, here's Toe Jam, a route many people have done. And look at this camper. I mean, Sprinter vans, yeah. 1970, you're in your Chevy or your Ford with your camper. No one in the other campsite. I mean, looks like paradise to me. That's a dope camper even by today's standards. Double Cross, maybe the most popular route in the park, I don't know. First ascent, John Rich and Mike Wolfe. First free ascent, Woody Stark, Dick Webster, and Bill Briggs. Classic picture on the dog leg. What's interesting is, if you look into the history, Royal Robbins and Mark Powell are credited with the first ascent of Busanier, I don't know, Busanier, that's what I say. But right here, first ascent, Don O'Kelly, Dave Davis, 69. Royal Robbins is credited as 1965, but it's not here. So who knows? Who knows where that history got mixed up. The Bong. A pleasant jam crack on the northwest corner of the Blob in Hidden Valley Campground. Still a very popular first climb, maybe first lead for people, great for beginners. People do it every weekend, tons of times. Now, the Bong, the name, you might be thinking, man, were these guys stoners? What's the deal? Well, no, I'm pretty sure it has to do with this. This is known as a bong, early form of protection made by Yvon Chouinard. You see that right there? That's the C for Chouinard. He made these before Black Diamond, and pound this bad boy into a big old crack. You know, it kind of has a little flex, so it can go in there. But yeah, this was an early piece of climbing protection, late 60s, early 70s, I believe. So this is called a bong, if you didn't know, and I'm guessing that's what that route is named after. So here we go, pretty interesting. There's a whole bouldering section in this book. Now I know John Gill, father of American bouldering, modern bouldering. You know, he was around in the 60s and 70s, but I just wouldn't have expected this book to have a whole bouldering section. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. But they do. And here they are on a lot of climbs that still get done today. I thought it might be fun to compare them to pictures in the new book. Here's the triangle, Howard Weimer on the west face of the triangle in Hidden Valley Campground. A lot of people have probably camped in this very campground. Okay, so here's the Miramont Ace Guidebook, the Bouldering Guidebook, a couple editions ago. Mine's pretty beat up, but here it is, the triangle. Howard Weimer 50 years ago in boots, little tucked in shirt, and there it is, the triangle, 45. They even call it Old Triangle Classic. V0. So I don't know, early 510 maybe, in the boots. Maybe it was easier back then, who knows? So here we have Triangle 2. Which is right there, 69. What do they call that in here? Slider, V0, mostly friction up a clean slab, 15 feet tall. Also the down climb. So still the down climb back then. And yeah, in boots. The bushwhack frequently provides entertaining falls towards the shrubbery below. And there's the bushwhack, and Miramontes nails it on this. He says, bushwhack predates 1970. A short, grainy jam crack. Here's intersection rock boulder. It's another one that Miramontes calls out right here. Intersection boulder left, V0 plus, predates 1970. Climb a slab with edges and such, 13 feet tall. So a couple of these, there might be more, but those are the ones I see where Miramontes he knew those were the first boulder problems done in the park, and it's kind of interesting to trace that. Maybe we'll do a series where we go and have people climb these very first boulder problems. There he is, high up there. I did want to point out, check out Gene Sukar. Look at this. He looks like he went golfing. He's got slacks, belt, maybe even a dress shirt, tucked in, some boots. Pretty badass. Climbing in other areas of Joshua Tree National Monument. Basically mean other than Hidden Valley, because that's what most of this book has done. Look at this guy traversing. I love this. Wonderland of Rocks, you know, popular now, very rarely explored. What's he say? No data on climbs done in this vast area is available, but a jam crack of 400 feet of F8 has been rumored. Can you imagine a 400-foot 5/8 hand crack? Whew. Man, maybe it's still out there. We just haven't found it. Oh, this is another funny story here. So, okay, look, Squa Pillar. Well, really, what do we know this as? We know that this is actually called the Lost Pencil. And here's another thing about climbing that hasn't changed. People, think they did a first ascent, they didn't, blah, blah, what this says. In 1967, Riverside climbers discovered the formation and spent several weekends placing a bolt ladder. Upon finally attaining the summit, they discovered someone had earlier placed a similar ladder on the opposite face. Wah, wah. No first ascent, buds. Sorry. This is funny. Dariuss's delight. This describes this wacky climb that was done. The only leader protection was a 2-finger angle, definitely a one-time climb. The route was named for Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam, Christian humanist who in 1509 wrote Encomium Moriae, or In Praise of Folly, satirizing the foibles of individuals and institutions. To even describe this route is to give praise to the folly of climbing such. Maybe this is a little artist rendition of what that was like. I don't know. Looks like it though, huh? In Praise of Folly. Love it. Okay, getting towards the back of the book. Uninhibited Miscellanea. It's great. Look at this guy. Tyrolean. There goes his hammer. Fell out. Okay, this is funny. This is a Climbing with the Desert Rats little essay, and it's by an anonymous contributor. I'll just read a little bit of it here. Recently, I had the pleasure of receiving an invitation for a day's climbing with a group from the Fraternal Order of Desert Rats Uninhibited. I bravely arrived at Hidden Valley Campground shortly after dawn, fully prepared for a day of 5th-class pitches. The rats were yet abed, strewn among and under the talus in varying states of ruin and disorder. Man, we all got friends like that, right? Get up early in the morning and kind of like, hey man, give me a little bit of time. So it sounds like the desert rats, like to party, like to sleep in. Arguing the best approach to the small ledge above the somewhat rotten overhang. Woody'll lay back the ceiling. Alfred fell asleep. Nail the corner, mantle that 1/2-inch bucket. Dick ought to lead, he's a professional. Dick quietly retired to a dark recess at the rear of the cavern. Howard is tall enough to reach the top without making a move. Man, even back then, tall guys, we get no credit. No credit. As the discussion raged, one bold soul tied on and quietly ventured out for a reconnaissance, rather self-consciously suggesting to the cave dwellers that someone might keep an eye on his rope should a mishap occur. Of course, this merely engendered jeering and raillery, designed to put his mind at ease. They asked which rope. They said not to be silly. They said to fall and show he was serious. They asked if they could have his lunch if he fell. Pretty funny. Here we are, Dick Webster. F9, here we go. It's a hard one. The water chute. Getting burly. This might be the funniest part of the whole guidebook. The fine art of dealing with tourists. For climbers only. All climbers are disgustingly aware, and these are not my highlights, by the way, so whoever had this had a similar sense of humor. All climbers are disgustingly aware of how, when given even the slightest provocation, the common tourist, tourista nauseatum, will spend hours observing, advising, and harassing a team inextricably attached to a route. This article will seek an effective method of combating the disease and explore the possibility of actually turning the experience into a reasonably enjoyable episode. Oh, God. They did not like tourists in this. You ever been yelled at by a tourist when you're, what are you doing? How do you get down? Well, yeah. Tourists are studiously ignored until they become too obnoxious and thick-headed to realize that they are not truly necessary to the success of the climb. In other words, we don't need you guys. We're up here just fine. And I love this. Pretty girls do not receive this treatment, but of course they are more properly classed as tourista stimulatum. Come on. We considered carrying a pocket full of small rocks. An accurately propelled expectoration will provide a none too subtle hint to even the most dull-witted. So basically, throw rocks at them. A possible problem involved in this method of repulsion is the possibility of encountering the rock-throwing tourist, tourista lithochucker. Caution dictates that the climber should carefully evaluate his potential target prior to action. It may occasionally be expedient to forestall action until the opponent's vertical reach has been exceeded. In other words, wait till you're high enough up in the air that they can't hit you with rocks before you start throwing rocks. Genius. And that's the last page of A Climber's Guide to Joshua Tree National Monument. I hope you enjoyed this look into this old book. I really did. And yeah, tune in for the next one. We'll see you there.